Japan is an amazing place to visit. It's full of culture and history, and it's one of the most beautiful countries in the world. It's visited by millions and millions of people every year, and it seems like the whole world is fascinated with this country. There's something intriguing about Japan, something that appeals to people's imagination. It's a mix of old and new, a mix of traditional values and optimistic futurism. It's foreign and strange, but at the same time also recognizable and comfortable. It's no surprise that so many people are fascinated with Japan. It's a country full of contrasts. But everything isn't good about Japan. There's a dark side to this country. Behind the fascinating culture, there's also a society filled with ignorance, oppression, and abuse. In this video, I'm gonna talk about the dark side of Japan. If you ask a Japanese person if there's racism in Japan, many will say that nope, there's no such thing in Japan. Which is of course complete rubbish, because the Japanese are quite racist. 98% of Japan's population is Japanese, so it's a very monocultural and homogeneous society. That means that most people in Japan won't even think about racism, because it's invisible to them. It doesn't affect them, and they don't think that they are racist. When a Japanese person claims that, for example, white or black people are more prone to violence, then they say that they're simply stating a fact. If they have statistics saying that certain ethnic groups have an overrepresentation of certain behaviors, then it's fine to judge everyone in that group based on that. Basically, the argument seems to be that discrimination of that kind isn't racism because it's statistically true. But that kind of thinking isn't limited to ethnicity, it also applies to tourists in general. There's been a bunch of tourists visiting Japan who have behaved in a pretty atrocious manner. But I don't think that that's a good enough reason to, for example, refuse restaurant bookings to all non-Japanese people, or refuse entry to certain stores, or deny access to services. And that's definitely happening, not just to visiting tourists, but also to non-Japanese residents who have lived here for many years. The Japanese are a nationalistic people, and they often see the Japanese as better than other races. And it's not just something that applies to white gaijin tourists, it goes a lot deeper than that. I think we all know that the Japanese did some pretty messed up things during World War II. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. During Japan's imperial era, they committed atrocities that killed millions of people. Sexual slavery, massacres, human experimentation, torture, and a lot more. It's not pleasant to look at a list of Japanese war crimes. But I'm not gonna go too much into that topic. There are plenty of places where you can read up on all of those horrific things. What I'm gonna talk about is Japanese lack of accountability for what they've done. The rape of Nanjing was a pretty well-documented event from 1937, where Japan did evil things in China. But some Japanese try to downplay those events, and they claim that there wasn't even a massacre at all. Not everyone, of course, but the Japanese government censored a lot of information during the war. Which makes sense, of course, all countries deal with propaganda. But Japan took it one step further. They were so thorough in their misinformation that many people in Japan still have a skewed view of what happened during World War II. Take Pearl Harbor, for example. Some Japanese people believe that Japan bombed Pearl Harbor in retaliation for the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The story goes that America bombed Japan for no reason at all, and the brave Japanese retaliated. And then they were unfairly punished at the end of the war. Just about every country has a dark past. Sweden has a lot of skeletons in its closet, for example. Everything from slave trade to ethnic oppression. But the Japanese nationalism leads to a lot of denial about the atrocities that they've done. I could say something cliché like the denial of the atrocities is the worst part. But no, the atrocities, that's the worst part. Many people dream of moving to Japan after visiting the country. They probably see themselves doing cool activities all the time and traveling all over the place. But in reality, they'd most likely find themselves locked into an office most of the time. Japan has a pretty miserable work-life balance. It is getting better, but it's still full of overworked salarymen. The wages aren't particularly good, and the whole work culture is strict and full of unwritten rules. You need to know how to behave towards your boss and your colleagues, and you'd better be prepared for long working hours. And if you're invited to a bar after work, then you pretty much have to accept, even if you're not in the mood for a boozy evening. Working in Japan is difficult, and it actually seems to be difficult regardless if you're a native or a foreigner. Japan is proud of their varied four-season weather. Winter is cold and full of snow. Spring is warm and lovely. Summer is even more warm and pleasant, and autumn is full of falling leaves. At least in theory. Summer is warm but not exactly pleasant. It's hot and humid, and people say that it's absolutely miserable. And it's not helped by the fact that Japanese houses are often quite poorly insulated. So your house will be cold in winter and unbearably hot in summer. Suddenly, those four seasons aren't as pleasant as you imagined any longer. But Japan is a clean country at least. The nature is pristine and the cities are free of trash. At least if you don't go to certain parts of Osaka, for example. The Japanese are very much into environmentalism and recycling, but it can be a little bit sanctimonious. The good thing is that people actually care about not littering and keeping the country clean. But the bad thing about this obsession with having a clean exterior means that you don't always get to the bottom of a problem. Kabukicho is an infamous red light district in Tokyo, and it's often littered with homeless young people. And that looks pretty bad. Kids shouldn't loiter and hang around in groups like that. So 120 police officers were sent to Kabukicho to drive away the kids. Not to take care of them or to sort out their problems. They were simply driven away so that Kabukicho wouldn't have gangs of kids hanging around. Out of sight, out of mind. And why did those kids hang around in Kabukicho to begin with? Well, that's because Japan has a problem with teenage homelessness. Japanese families can be pretty strict and abusive, and some teenagers would rather sleep on the street than take more of that abuse. And the authorities won't do anything about the abuse even if they report it. Some young women are also lonely and get lured in by charming young men. And these young men often turn out to be part of a host club scheme. Host clubs are places where women can pay to simply have a good time, get flirted with, and get lots of attention. But this can turn out to be very manipulative. And the girls can be convinced that they're almost sort of in a relationship. And long story short, after getting lured into these quote-unquote relationships, women can start selling their bodies to make money for presents for their sort of boyfriends. And those are some of the girls you see hanging around in Kabukicho. Japan's problem with homelessness isn't something that can be solved by just sending in the police. It has deeper roots in loneliness, hopelessness, and how you're not allowed to report family abuse. Japan is a country that has very strict social codes. It's a strict country, not just in work culture, but in all aspects of living here. You need to behave properly, and you need to act like everyone else. This type of conformist society is something that doesn't really fit everyone. There's a lot of indirectness in Japan too. People won't say to your face if you're doing something wrong. You should understand it from context. That means that it's difficult to get honest feedback, and it also means that it's easy to make a mistake and become ostracized. Japan is also a very lonely country. You've probably heard of hikikomoris, people who shut themselves in and isolate themselves from the world. But that's not it. The Japanese loneliness also applies to people in general. Japan has a lot of single people, and people who don't have a lot of interactions with others at all. The work-life balance, or lack thereof, makes it difficult to meet people. And even when you do, Japan is an introverted country. And many people struggle with having personal relationships of any kind. And if you're a foreigner, well, then things are even worse. If you don't know Japanese, then you'll always be just a tourist, a foreigner, a gaijin. And if you know Japanese, then you'll still always be a gaijin, and there will still always be a distance between you and the native Japanese. Which means that the loneliness is even worse for non-Japanese people in Japan. Now, all of this sounds pretty grim, doesn't it? I painted a picture of a country filled with problems where you'll be miserable all the time. This video focuses on the bad things in Japan simply because there's already so many other videos focusing on the good things. You need to see all sides of a country to get the full picture. And the interesting thing is that despite all of these negative points, people universally say that the positives outweigh the negatives. Japan simply has so many amazing things, so people still choose to visit the country and live here regardless of any difficulties. So keep that in mind before you bring your pitchforks and tell me how bad I am for just focusing on the negative sides of Japan. It's still a completely amazing place to visit, and I'm loving every second of being here. And that's about it. That was a video all about the bad sides of Japan. I hope you found it interesting. Like and subscribe, but most importantly, have a great day.